25th, 2020, George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, died after a white police officer, holding his knee on Floyd's neck, pinned him to the pavement while he was in handcuffs.
Earl, I think that we should let everybody know today, the people that are watching the video, that we are social distancing. We're out in the grotto. We're away from any possibilities of transmissions of COVID-19, and also that it's one of the most gorgeous days we've had so far this year.
Oh, yes, it is, and this is just a gorgeous grotto.
Well, thanks to my wife. Thanks to Lady Di. Earl, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions to start out with. You're running for Lucas County Sheriff in the fall of this year.
Correct.
You're desperately needed in that position. We've been fortunate enough to have some really good sheriffs in the past in Lucas County, and still do. However, you are running for Lucas County Sheriff. I'd like you to discuss your credentials for that position, if you don't mind.
Well, I've been in law enforcement for just about 40 years now. But, I was born and raised in Toledo, went to graduated from Scott High School, graduated from the University of Toledo, went into the military for a short span of time.
What did you do in the military, Earl?
Well, I was a combat medic during the Vietnam War.
I see.
Yes. And once I was discharged from the military, I went to the University of Toledo. And then from the University of Toledo, I was a University of Toledo police officer for a while. I became a liquor agent for a number of years. A matter of fact, my first retirement was from the Ohio Department of Public Safety investigative unit. I was agent in charge of enforcement operations for Northwest Ohio. And then I was appointed Deputy Director of Ohio Homeland Security, which had another few years of stretch. And then after that, I retired and rode my motorcycle all over the country.
Now, you worked for the governor for quite some time, is that correct?
For a while.
Yeah.
Correct.
And you were one of his top law enforcement agents in Columbus, Ohio.
Well, under the Ohio Department of Public Safety, yes.
Yes. And a lot has been printed about your retirement, and the only thing that the papers have said is that you retired from public service.
Yeah.
That's not exactly true here. It is factual, but it's not the whole truth. Would you care to explain some of that, please?
Well, I've never retired from public service.
No.
Because I still do a lot of it.
Yeah.
And as you know, I'm the president of the Toledo Buffalo Soldiers, and if you know about that group, we're into all kind of community service stuff, into training, and so forth and so on. So no, and again, under the job under the Ohio Department of Public Safety, we were liquor enforcement, and then as the Deputy Director of Ohio Homeland Security, which came with a lot of other responsibilities in keeping Ohio safe from terrorist attacks.
You dealt with the FBI task force too,
oh, yes.
Correct?
I was one
Could you explain a little bit about that? Because
sure
that's
can.
really important today.
Well, I sat on the FBI's executive task force for the JTTF, which is the Joint Terrorism Task Force, here in Northwest Ohio. So a lot of experience there, a lot of things that we've done to keep this community safe from those kinds of attacks, and other things. So that came with collaborative relationships. If you know anything about me, I love coalitions and collaborative relationships, because we can't do it by ourselves. No. It takes all of us to protect each other and to protect our country.
You've even worked on forces that have helped capture and prevent terrorist activities in the past. Would you care to elaborate on that just a little bit, so the people that don't know you get to know a little bit about the depth of your experience?
Yeah. Well, some stuff we can talk about, and some stuff we can't.
Yes.
But yeah, we worked on those task forces, not only terrorism task forces, but other task forces involving narcotics, involving some white collar crimes kind of thing. So we worked on quite a bit of task forces.
I see. Now, with the Buffalo Soldiers, you've explained to me in the past that you put on training programs for youth, and a lot of them have to do with inner city youth, but not always. And that in your programs, you teach young people how to survive being pulled over by anybody and how to comply now and complain later. Would you care to explain that to the audience, please?
Oh, yeah. Well, What to Do and Stop by Police is one of our signature programs under the Toledo Buffalo Soldiers. And that program, is a safety program. We believe it has saved citizens' lives as well as our police officers' lives. And basically the program says comply now, complain later, because you can't win on the street.
Yeah.
And so it teaches those techniques. Now we get people talk sometimes about, Earl, even if you comply, we may still have issues with police officers. And I say, if you comply, as long as you are complying, the majority of the time you'll be fine. And if you have a problem with a police officer, then you can file a complaint later.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think that's awfully important, because some of the things that we see today, not necessarily the most recent, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but some of the most egregious things are when people just automatically resist and take a physical way to resist. And that leads to a bad ending in a lot of cases.
Right. That's why we say comply now and complain later. Even if you think the police officer may be wrong, if you still comply, in most cases, you'll be able to at least tell your story in court. If you don't comply, we see some of the things that happens, and all the way up to losing your life. And so that's why that program is so important, to comply with police officers, regardless to how you feel.
You've been involved in this some time. I've been paying attention to your career. We've known each other for over 45 years. Yep. And I know that you're on the first call list from various mayor's offices. If there's a issue that is a tinderbox downtown, you're on the first call.
Well, we've been notified and requested to help in certain situations, not only in this community but in other communities as well. And I remember not too long ago when Sandusky had an issue with a police community issue because of a particular stop, and when the chief called, Chief Orgowitz, it would be, we came to and had a meeting to find out what we can do as an organization to help, and we put on a community program, brought the community in, let the community speak, because one of the problems we have in the society, if we don't listen to each other, if we don't have a dialogue with each other, you can't get anything resolved. Right. And so we had that dialogue, and that those stresses and things that appeared not to be working during that time started working, because the level of anxiety dropped in both the police officers and the community. Yeah. So dialogue is real important.
Before we move on, I'd like to ask you one more thing about Buffalo Soldiers, please. You've been doing that for a number of years now.
Oh, yes.
You help feed communities that don't have food.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you have a program called Off the Rails. Would you care to explain that, please, and the amount of work and time that it goes in from your folks to provide meals for people that can't afford it and can't be food challenged, and they are?
Correct. Well, during this recent time of this pandemic, with the COVID-19, when the government started shutting the economy down, obviously people lost jobs. Yeah. And so we then joined with Off the Rails, which is a food trolley ran by the Regnus family, and we sit down and talk. What can we do to help? With folks that are losing jobs, with our children, because a lot of meals that children receive, most of those children get it in school. So once school shut down, now there's an issue with them receiving meals, although TPS and other organizations have stepped up to the plate and doing a wonderful job out there. Yeah. And so what we did, or what we are doing with Off the Rails, it's a big food trolley, which is a commercial kitchen inside. It's a commercial. It's beautiful. Commercial kitchen on wheels.
It is.
And so we can take that kitchen and put it right in the middle of a community and feed on the spot, cooked hot meals that they can grab and go. And so we also partner with the Lucas County Housing Authority, which has, I don't know how, they have thousands of residents. Yeah. And a lot of those residents have lost jobs. A matter of fact, one quick story: we had a single mom that came to the trolley receiving meals, and she worked for a particular hotel here in the county. And she worked for 2 hotels, one full-time and one part-time. She's got 3 kids. She lost her full-time and part-time job, and she just didn't know what to do. And she was so thankful for this program. And it's the program, or the operation, is labeled with Unity, feeding our community. And with Unity means just that. There's a lot of supporters of it. Business leaders are supporting it. Folks like ProMedica, a Paramount Advantage,
Owens Community,
Owens Community, the Rotary Clubs of Toledo, all kinds of organizations out there, and then individuals as well. So we get a lot of support, a lot of financial support that's given to this program to keep it going, to help feed people.
Well, we've got a number of things going on all at one time. We've got COVID-19 that's killed over 100,000 people in the United States. We've got about 1/4 of the world's infections. We've got 1/3 of the world's deaths. And then on top of that, we're looking at over 25% and maybe even approaching 40% unemployment. The situation is only going to exacerbate itself. The food banks are exhausted in many places.
Absolutely.
With thousands of cars waited in line. How can we help that?
Well, first of all, I wish we really knew what this was.
Yes.
There's so much information out there that contradicts each other.
Yep.
For example, you're told to wear masks. Some say don't wear masks.
Yeah.
And these are doctors and scientists, and so you don't know what to do.
And political leaders.
And political leaders,
Yeah.
especially political leaders.
Yeah.
You don't know what to do and how to do it. And I always say, and I have to say this, is that I just do not believe they should have shut our country down and shut the economy down, because to feed my family, I don't care what it costs me to feed my family. If it costs my life to feed my family, then I need to feed my family.
Yeah.
And I don't know how in the world we're going to recover from this, especially small businesses. We all have friends that have small businesses that they're done.
Yeah.
So and then the other thing we talk about this country is the freedoms we have in this country, and to shut those freedoms down, that's why there's a lot of protests. So I'm not too sure that politicians are making the right decision here.
I agree. And while you're talking about family businesses being shut down, last night there were protests all across the United States.
Right.
In over a dozen cities. And in a lot of those cities, not all, but in a lot of those cities, I think there were some provocateurs that went in and incinerated and torched buildings of people that were their own businesses.
Well,
we've got to find a way to deal with that.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that, Earl?
Well, first, and that involves the death of Mr. Floyd.
Yes.
That I believe was murdered by a Minnesotan police
So do I.
officer.
Yes.
And so first, my thoughts go out to that family, and my condolences to that family as well. That did not have to happen.
No.
And so that's what's causing a lot of the protests that you see out there now. You get to a point that it just boils over, and it boiled over with everybody across this country that's seen that video. At least the ones that I know were appalled by what they see.
I see 75% participation. Between 60 and 75% participation are from young white people.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yes. And right, and it's not just African Americans or blacks in this country that are upset.
No.
Because of the way that we've been treated over the years by police officers. And so what you see with all these protests has come to that. We are expressing ourselves, bringing attention to this, because a lot of us are saying, no more. Something has got to change now. And I think something will change, because if you see, it looks like a lot of citizens, Americans, are involved,
Yep.
In this whole process of protesting, with peaceful protesting, with getting things done. Unfortunately, in these kind of protests, you do have those that their heart is not into what the protest is supposed to be about, other than than the looting. And we hear people that say, well, there's a reason for the looting and some of the violence you see, because that's how we express ourselves when things happen to us. Well, peaceful protest is one thing, civil unrest is another.
Oh,
and
boy.
we cannot allow civil unrest, because you can't get much done.
No.
And so we had a meeting yesterday. That our mayor of the city of Toledo is just don't know how to handle this if it comes here. I had a meeting with some of the leaders yesterday, and we talked about this. And my whole process of thinking of this, we're looking at why people are complaining, why people are so upset over this. It's the treatment that certain segments of our population have received from our police.
Yeah.
And that's why I believe so wholeheartedly in training. We need to spend as much money as we can in keeping our officers trained, keeping them updated, and reinforcement of that training involving treatment of people. And I say this all the time, if any police officers are listening, we're servants. The community, the taxpayers, are really our bosses. They pay our paycheck. And every time that there's some legislation up there to raise money for policing, for first responders, which includes salaries, which include equipment, which include benefits. We are your employers, or you are my employer.
Yeah.
And so we need to treat those citizens with the utmost of respect. And so that's why I believe in training. I believe in policies, conduct policies, and I think we need to reinforce those policies with our police officers, and we need those on the street field checks by supervisors to help reinforce those policies. But the other side of that too, citizens sometimes need to look in the mirror as well.
Citizens need to conduct themselves like gentlemen and gentlewomen too.
Correct.
The vast majority of police I've ever dealt with are outstanding citizens. All they want to do is go home at the end of the day after serving the public and be with their families the way you and I want to be with ours.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And so many times people forget that. And when they get pulled over, they want to be confrontational right off the bat, and then sometimes explosively confrontational. Which brings me to this. The mayor last night of Atlanta, she said that a large amount of the people in Atlanta that burnt and that had violence were people from outside the area. The mayor of Minnesota said that 80%, their guess was, educated guess, was 80% of the people that were there that were promoting violence were from outside the area and from other states. Mm-hmm.
Correct.
What's going on? What do you suspect with that?
Well, again, as you said earlier, some people look for these kinds of protests to then involve themselves in other things, whether it's looting, whether it's encouraging and the conflict. But two, let's not lose sight of what happened and what brought us to this.
Right.
Because the point that brought us to this is what we need to address. We need to address the community-police relations. Because if we don't have good relations between that community and it's the African American community in policing, you get just what you see. So I'm not real critical on what you see the aftermath of this is. I'm more critical on we need to solve this, and how we solve this is us sitting at the table having good positive dialogue and doing action. We need to do action. We need to make sure that police officers understand, again, that they are servants to this community, that they are to respect this community, no matter what the race is, and they need to do good community policing. Period. And so, if not, you get just what you see. Civil unrest, as I said earlier, you can't have civil unrest because it puts everybody in danger.
It does.
And so we need to resolve that civil unrest. I've seen the concern and the fear in the mayor's face, of this civil unrest is causing other things to happen. The economy. I mean, look at Detroit. Detroit took a long time to recover from, from civil unrest back in the 60s.
That's right.
And other cities. And I think we as Americans, we as African Americans, we really need to think out what's happening. But again, we also need to be treated just as any other citizen.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the problem as well.
Well, Toledo's had some examples of civil unrest in the past, and I know for a fact that you've been called in to help diffuse those issues. You've done it very well. This evening, there's going to be a protest in Toledo, Ohio. What's your thoughts? Where do you think that's going to go?
Well, again, people are expressing themselves, because of they're tired.
Yeah.
They're tired of the way that they've been treated, by their police or by their community. I mean, if you look in the black community, we, our education is not the best a lot of times. Our economy in that community is not the best sometimes. Our health care, it just goes to a lot of things. And so what happened to Mr. Floyd just really culminated into what we see happening today, because now it's an outward expression. And so the protests this evening, I think that there's going to be 3 of them today. They're going to protest. They're expressing themselves.
That's fine.
And I think some of the stuff that they're going to talk about will be how do we get beyond this? What do we see that that we want to happen within police departments? But what we have to be careful of, there's a lot more out there, that chiefs have to deal with, other than just us protesting and say we demand this, because we got unions. And so police chiefs or city mayors, or council people have to deal with unions. So those things don't happen that fast. But what can happen swiftly is a reinforcement of conduct policies, to make sure that police officers understand what the conduct policy is, what the conduct code are, who you really work for, who do you respect out there. And I think that's what most people are talking about. Most of these protests are about the treatment of people from our police.
Earl, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you running for Lucas County Sheriff. We've had some awfully good sheriffs in the past. I think you're going to be one of the top sheriffs that's ever been in the state of Ohio. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And a lot of people don't understand the role of Lucas County Sheriff. I'd like you to explain it to them, and I'll see you when you're done.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Earl. Oh, yeah.
My name is Earl Mack, and I'm running for the Lucas County Sheriff, and I approve of this message. If you know anything about the sheriff is the top law enforcement officer in the county, has a lot of responsibilities, from running the jail to administrative processes to protection of the court, and working with other local law enforcement agencies within the county for your protection. And I have a lot of experience doing that. So I'm running for your Lucas County Sheriff, and I'm asking for your support.